If you're watching this right now, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear from inside Angola prison is colder, darker, and far more unsettling than anything we've covered before. The morning began with an unnatural stillness inside Louisiana State Penitentiary, Angola, the largest maximum security prison in America. Silence in Angola never meant peace. It meant pressure. It meant something was brewing behind steel doors and concrete walls. Officers felt it. Inmates felt it. Even the air felt heavier. Inside dormitory C block, Officer Miles Carter walked the tier with the instincts of a man shaped by 11 years of high-security prison work. When he reached cell 14, something immediately caught his attention. The door wasn't flush against the frame. Not open, just wrong. Pushed from the inside sometime during the night. Carter tapped the bars, called the inmate's name, waited for the usual irritated reply. Nothing. He signaled for backup. When Officers Ramirez and Dupree arrived, they unlocked the cell and pushed the door inward. What they found made the tier fall silent. Inmate Raymond Blue Harlan, a heavily tattooed lifer known for his calm, calculating manner, lay unconscious on the floor. No struggle, no blood, no overturned furniture. His breathing was shallow, his body carefully positioned, as if someone had laid him down with intention. Something about the scene felt staged. As medics were called, Carter scanned the cell. That's when he saw it, a small piece of folded paper wedged beneath the bunk frame. Clean. Placed carefully. He opened it. Checked the workshop. It has already begun. No name. No threat. No explanation. Angola immediately entered controlled lockdown, the kind used when suspicion overrides evidence and officers need total control. Even without a riot or visible danger, Carter knew this was the kind of message that triggered jail investigation protocols and full-tier sweeps. But the deeper they looked, the stranger it got. Harlan's tattoos, swirling blue ink built over decades, showed faint bruising underneath, like someone had gripped him with precise force. No internal injuries. No lacerations. No poison. Just sedation. A clean knockout delivered by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't a fight. It was a message. Warden Lionel Reeves, a man who despised surprises more than violence, arrived with the hard stare of someone trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces. He read the note once and immediately ordered a sweep of the industrial workshop, one of the most monitored sections of the entire prison with cameras, guard rotations, and restricted access. But when officers entered the workshop, the tension jumped. A workstation stood completely empty. Tools accounted for. Locks secure. Cameras active. But the dust pattern revealed a rectangular outline where a large heavy object once sat, something not listed in the equipment logs. Officer Dupree ran his hand across the floor. No sign of tampering. Nothing missing on paper, he said. But something used to be here. Reeves stared at the outline. And someone moved it without alerting a single camera. He wasn't wrong. Security footage showed nothing. No shadows. No unauthorized movement. No inmate near the workshop at the time Harlan collapsed. Except for one detail. At 2:14 a.m., the workshop hallway camera glitched for exactly 4 seconds. Not long enough to trigger alarms, but long enough to hide movement. For seconds inside Angola was a lifetime. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, internal investigator Dana Whitford examined Harlan. Known for her calm presence during inmate interrogation, she noticed a fine white residue on his knuckles. Lab tests later confirmed it was metal polish compound from the workshop, used for smoothing steel edges. Harlan hadn't been assigned to the workshop shift. Someone took him there. Drugged him. Moved him across Angola without alerting any surveillance. Back in the workshop, officers widened their search. Outside, near the old agricultural crates, Officer Ramirez spotted something partially buried under debris. A large metal plate. Heavy. Thick. Bolts sawed off clean. Not stolen, relocated. Not damaged, repurposed. On its edge were small engraved marks, careful measurement lines. Not random. Not decorative. They were planning marks. Blueprint lines. Someone inside Angola was building something. Prep work. Testing. Measuring. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't small. Before Reeves could order a full structural audit, an alarm blared across the facility. Another inmate, Darren Cole, also tattooed, also positioned neatly on the floor, was found unconscious in a different unit. Same condition. Same lack of struggle. Same quiet, deliberate placement. On his bunk lay a second folded note. This one read, "You're already too late." The room fell silent. Carter, Reeves, and Whitford exchanged a look none of them wanted to hold. 2 inmates taken down with no witnesses. 2 messages suggesting coordination. A missing structural object repurposed for reasons nobody yet understood. A deliberate camera glitch. No weapons. No open defiance. Just a trail of quiet warnings left like breadcrumbs. For a place known as the Alcatraz of the South, Angola wasn't supposed to have problems this calculated. Someone inside the prison wasn't just plotting. They were executing. Slowly. Quietly. Precisely. And based on that last note, they believed the prison was already behind. The morning after the double collapse, Angola prison was a cage within a cage. High-security prison protocols had escalated to full lockdown. Corridors that were usually quiet now hummed with the muted shuffle of prison guards patrolling in pairs, radios crackling intermittently. Officers like Carter and Dupree moved with purpose, eyes darting, trying to reconcile surveillance footage with impossible events. 2 inmates unconscious. No struggle. 2 notes hinting at premeditated activity. A missing metal plate repurposed for an unknown plan. Internal investigator Dana Whitford entered the scene like a storm of calm authority. Known for her precision in inmate interrogation, she first examined the incapacitated men. Tattoos ran in sharp blue ink across their arms and necks, a visual language of gang affiliation, personal history, and long years inside. Whitford noted subtle bruising and residual metal polish compound on their knuckles, evidence linking them both to the workshop despite official assignments. Someone had broken the rules without leaving a trace. Whitford gathered officers in the control hub, buzzing with monitors and constant prison surveillance feeds. Multiple cameras had captured nothing unusual, except the 4-second glitch in the workshop hallway. 4 seconds was enough for someone to move the metal plate, knock out an inmate, and erase any visual trail. Who had the access, knowledge, and audacity to operate undetected? She began interviewing inmates with workshop access. One by one, they were brought into interview rooms under soft, blue-tinted lights. Each tattooed, each with stories etched into skin, each with motives buried in years of confinement. Some whispered about Harlan's influence over other tattooed inmates and subtle connections to prison gangs. Others hinted at hidden alliances and cell block tension that guards could never fully understand. Outside, guards in rotating patrols secured access points. Doors double-checked, locks tested, cameras cross-referenced. Inmate logs were pulled, shift schedules, work assignments, and unusual behaviors documented. Yet nothing explained the sedation of 2 men or the missing plate. Whitford turned to the notes. Both were clean, folded with precision, planted to be found quickly. Whoever left them was testing not only the system but human response. This was criminal psychology at work, manipulation, planning, assertion of power inside the prison walls. Interviews with guards revealed nothing unusual. Equipment and tools were accounted for. Yet gaps remained. Whitford noted small inconsistencies in one guard's timeline. Minor but enough to keep him under scrutiny. In Angola, even minor deviations could signal deliberate action. The workshop became the focus. Dust patterns, fingerprints, and residues were analyzed. Faint scratches along a gate hinge indicated someone had tested access. A small, precise mark suggesting preparation for a jail escape attempt or manipulation of infrastructure. Every detail catalogued: residue, dust outlines, subtle marks, pieces of a growing puzzle. Whitford reconstructed possible sequences. How could someone move Harlan into the workshop undetected? How was the metal plate removed, measured, and replaced? How were the inmates incapacitated yet unharmed? These questions forced consideration of covert inmate alliances, insider knowledge, and potential guard complicity, however indirect. Conflicting witness statements emerged. One inmate claimed to see a shadow near the workshop. Another said it was impossible given guard rotations. Prison gangs whispered about internal power struggles and unspoken codes overriding rules. Whitford realized this wasn't random. It was controlled, testing limits, gauging reactions, asserting dominance. By afternoon, investigators focused on patterns. Blue-toned corridors, chemical traces, scratched hinges, and the camera glitch painted a picture of deliberate preparation. Angola was revealing its weaknesses, layer by layer. Every prison lockdown, every rotation, every surveillance feed became a tool to anticipate the next move. Someone inside believed they were untouchable. Then came a breakthrough. Logs showed both incapacitated men briefly left assigned areas while guards believed wings were secure. Timing matched the 4-second glitch perfectly. Procedural blind spots had been exploited. The first phase of a plan was executed, leaving only breadcrumbs. Whitford's notes grew dense, linking criminal motives, cell block tension, and tattooed inmate behaviors. The missing plate now aligned with prior attempts to repurpose objects. Precision was unnerving. Night fell across Angola's grounds. Officers moved like ghosts, scanning for irregularities. Every shadow seemed suspect. Every tattooed inmate a potential key. A low-level inmate whispered of Harlan's secret contacts. Some tattoos, he said, marked access, allegiance, and trust. Angola's skin contained maps, codes, silent warnings. The missing plate, incapacitated inmates, and cryptic notes were part of a deeper strategy. A test, a signal, a precursor to something audacious. The day ended with a chilling realization. The internal investigation uncovered the first layer, but this was only the beginning. Angola, built to contain men and crush plans, had already been infiltrated by subtle, calculating intelligence. And that intelligence was still active, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the next opportunity. The sun rose over Louisiana State Penitentiary in a pale, washed-out shade of blue, but inside the air felt sharper, more alert. The tension from the investigation had not faded. It had grown teeth. The two incapacitated inmates were awake now but offered nothing but evasive answers and half-formed recollections. Their tattoos, layered blue and black patterns stretching along their arms and chests, twitched with every subtle movement, a map of allegiances they refused to explain. Investigator Dana Whitford sensed something shifting beneath the surface. Inmates who normally bantered along the tier walked quietly, eyes low, avoiding conversations. Guards tightened their rotations during the prison lockdown, checking doors twice, verifying logs, and watching the high-security units with renewed suspicion. Inside the north cell block, Harlan was the focus. Tattoos winding from his neck to his hands made him easily recognizable, but it was the calm in his posture that unsettled officers. He sat on his bunk, back straight, fingers tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm against the concrete, almost like he was counting. When Whitford approached his cell, he looked up once, offered a faint, unreadable smile, then returned to the tapping. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence felt intentional, and silence in Angola was rarely harmless. Elsewhere, officers reviewed the glitch again, 4 seconds still missing from the workshop camera feed. When technicians attempted deeper diagnostics, they discovered traces of unauthorized access. It wasn't sophisticated hacking. It was internal manipulation. Someone with knowledge of old wiring, outdated relays, and blind spots. Someone who had been inside long enough to learn Angola's bones. Whitford expanded the investigation. She gathered tattooed inmates one by one for further inmate interrogation, looking for inconsistencies in their statements. Small cracks began to appear. One inmate claimed the workshop had been locked all morning. Another insisted he heard movement inside. A third said he saw a guard walking near the door at an unusual hour, but his description didn't match any staff member on duty. The contradictions felt staged, as though someone had instructed them to mislead, but not well enough to be convincing. Whitford studied the two incapacitated inmates next. Now awake and restless, both denied participating in anything risky. They blamed faulty ventilation, dizziness, dehydration. Excuses that contradicted the bruise marks on their wrists and faint traces of polished compound. One of them, a tattooed man named Brooks, avoided eye contact. The other, Lacey, stared at the wall, jaw clenched. Whitford watched them carefully. Their fear was real. Genuine fear didn't need dialogue. Word of the investigation spread, and with it came something more dangerous than silence: cooperation with investigators. In Angola, being seen as helpful could invite consequences. Some inmates glanced over their shoulders more often. Guards noticed notes being passed faster than usual. Conversations stopped abruptly when officers approached. The cell block tension felt thick enough to press against the walls. By midday, a new problem emerged. A small metal tool, a custom sharpened fragment, was found hidden behind a loose brick near the workshop gate. Not a weapon but a shaping tool. The kind used to refine metal for precise fitting. It matched the residue found on the missing metal plate. This wasn't random theft. It was preparation. Whitford convened a closed meeting with the warden and intelligence officers. She explained the pattern, the incapacitations, the camera glitch, the missing plate, and now the tool. It was the early phase of a larger attempt, likely a jail escape attempt being assembled piece by piece. The warden ordered increased patrols. Solitary confinement units were monitored more aggressively. Officers were instructed to quietly investigate guard behavior for signs of compromise, though nothing pointed directly to staff involvement. Later that night, Whitford returned to the surveillance hub. The blue glow of the monitors carved harsh lines across her face as she watched hours of footage. Nothing obvious. No slip-ups. Nothing bold enough to draw attention. But at 2:14 a.m. she noticed something subtle. A tattooed inmate named Cortez paused outside the workshop hallway, looked directly at the camera, and smirked. Not long, not exaggerated. Just enough to acknowledge it. Then he walked away. It wasn't proof. It wasn't even actionable. But it was psychological warfare, the quiet confidence of a man who believed the prison rules did not apply to him. Whitford pulled Cortez for questioning the next morning. He sat calmly, tattoos stark against the blue-tinted interrogation room lights. He answered every question with precision, not nervous, not defensive, almost rehearsed. When asked about the workshop, he shrugged. People walk past doors every day, ma'am. Doesn't make it a crime. His tone was casual, but his eyes held something sharper: calculation. As tension grew, so did danger. That afternoon, an officer found a torn scrap of paper wedged under a cell door. It showed a rough sketch, a section of Angola's service tunnels. No names. No instructions. Just lines, arrows, measurements, the kind used in planning stages. Someone had mapped the next phase. Before the officer could report it, another inmate shouted for attention from the opposite tier. A tattooed man known as Redman had collapsed in the corridor. No visible injuries. No signs of a struggle. Guards rushed him to the infirmary, where medical staff said his vitals were normal but his consciousness faded in and out. Another unexplained collapse. Another sign the plan was accelerating. Whitford connected the dots. Incapacitations, sketches, tools, camera manipulation, all separate moves that formed a larger structure. Whoever was behind this was orchestrating pressure. Testing Angola's response. Pushing boundaries one calculated step at a time. That night, as officers conducted another sweep, a new discovery froze them in place. Behind a ventilation grate in the south hallway, hidden in darkness, lay the missing metal plate, reshaped, drilled, edges filed smooth. Not discarded. Prepared. Ready for use. Someone wasn't just planning something. They were almost ready. Whitford stared at the plate, jaw tight. The walls of Angola had been manipulated from the inside, piece by piece, by someone who understood the prison better than many staff did. And they were still out there. Still preparing. Still one step ahead. The discovery of the reshaped metal plate sent a silent shockwave through Louisiana State Penitentiary. Angola had seen attempts, plans, and rumors before, but this was different. This was methodical. Calculated. The kind of operation that almost always had a brain behind it, and that brain was still inside these walls. Investigator Dana Whitford barely slept. The plate lay on a steel evidence table in the surveillance hub, reflecting the cold blue glow of the monitors. Officers hovered nearby, uneasy. Every clue revealed another question. Every answer felt like a distraction. The day began with an intensified internal investigation. Tattooed inmates were pulled aside in controlled intervals to avoid tipping off connections. Guards tightened procedures, radios kept clear, and movements inside every tier were slow but hyper-aware. Inside the north cell block, tension was visible in the smallest gestures. Quiet whispers, glances traded between cell doors, subtle signs of shifting alliances. Angola wasn't loud today. It was listening. Whitford returned to the two previously incapacitated inmates for follow-up questioning. They remained evasive, offering fragmented stories and competing timelines. Brooks insisted he remembered nothing important. Lacey stared at his palms, tracing the inked symbols tattooed across his skin as though searching for courage. Whitford studied their behavior, the tremors, the avoidance, the sudden stiffness when certain questions were asked. Fear whispered louder than their words. Fear always pointed somewhere. Meanwhile, guards cataloged tools and materials in the workshop. One officer noticed that a narrow section of wiring along the outer wall had been recently disturbed. Dust displaced, screws slightly misaligned. That meant someone had tampered with the workshop's power earlier than suspected. Maybe weeks earlier. Maybe months. This wasn't a sudden plan. It was an old one resurfacing. Later that afternoon, a quiet breakthrough occurred. A young corrections officer reviewed archived footage and spotted an unusual pattern. Harlan, the calm, tattooed inmate from earlier chapters, appeared near several locations tied to the investigation, not lingering long, just passing by, always during guard rotation transitions. Never too obvious. Never too risky. Always watching. Whitford immediately brought in Harlan. He entered the interview room with the same unsettling composure, tattoos curling along his neck like coded messages. He sat down without being asked. He didn't resist. He didn't look nervous. He simply stared. Whitford asked straight questions. About the plate, the workshop, the knocks, the incapacitated men. Harlan answered none of them. Instead he said something else, something vague but pointed. People don't build plans, he murmured. They build pressure. The plan comes after. Then he leaned back, hands folded, eyes calm. The interview ended with more questions than answers, but one thing was certain. He wasn't denying involvement. He was challenging them to understand it. Back in the surveillance hub, new intel arrived. An inmate known as Red Man, the one who collapsed in Chapter 3, regained consciousness briefly. A nurse overheard him whisper a single name before fading out again. Cortez. That was enough to shift the direction of the investigation. Cortez had already been on Whitford's radar, confident, calculated, and always positioned just far enough from suspicion. His tattoos, intricate and layered, carried symbols linked to multiple inmate circles. He understood alliances. He understood influence. Whitford pulled Cortez for a second interrogation. This time his posture was different, less casual, more guarded. He sensed the shift. He felt the pressure. When asked about Redman, he smirked again the same way he smirked at the camera days earlier. I didn't put him on that floor, he said quietly. People put themselves in places they shouldn't be. But Whitford wasn't looking for confessions. She was watching his reactions, the subtle tightening in his jaw when the workshop was mentioned, the flicker in his expression when shown a photo of the reshaped metal plate. He knew exactly what was happening. He just wasn't saying it. Evening descended across Angola. Blue shadows stretched across the yard, creating long, thin patterns across concrete. Guards began nighttime rotations. Inmates retreated to their cells. The atmosphere felt unstable, like a wire pulled too tight. Then something unexpected happened. A maintenance report from 2 months prior resurfaced. A small notice about a vent cover near the south hallway being reported loose and then repaired. The signature on the repair order wasn't a guard's. It belonged to an inmate on work detail. The name was familiar. Cortez. Whitford connected the dots instantly. Cortez wasn't just involved. He'd been preparing infrastructure long before any signs emerged. But before Whitford could act, an alarm echoed across the tier. A guard had discovered fresh scrape marks on the inside of another vent panel, not far from where the plate was found. The marks were new. Hours old at most. Whoever was planning this wasn't slowing down. Guards sealed the hallway. Investigators examined the vent. Behind the panel, hidden in the dark recess of the duct, they found something chilling. A partially assembled mechanism, built from smaller metal fragments and workshop scraps. Not a weapon. Not a tool. Something engineered to manipulate space, possibly a lock, a grate, or a structural hinge. The level of precision was undeniable. This was someone who had studied angles, tension points, and airflow shafts. Someone who had taken their time. Someone who believed Angola had a weakness. Whitford stared at the makeshift device, pulse steady but mind racing. The plan was now visible, not fully but enough to understand its scale. This was more than a bold escape attempt. It was a structural infiltration designed from the inside, hidden beneath daily routines and blind spots. As she pieced together the clues, the plate, the sketches, the incapacitations, the tunnels, a chilling realization took shape. This wasn't one man's project. It was a network. A silent collaboration woven through tattoos, glances, and unspoken agreements. And the most dangerous part? They weren't finished yet. Whitford exhaled slowly, steadying herself for what was coming next. The truth behind Angola's walls had finally surfaced. A truth built by hands that had learned to turn confinement into opportunity. But exposing it meant confronting something deeper than escape. It meant confronting inmates who believed they understood Angola better than the people who ran it. The prison felt unusually calm the next morning, too calm. The kind of silence that settles not because peace exists, but because everyone is waiting for something they can't name. 4 days now, tension had been drifting quietly through the blocks, subtle enough that the guards didn't see it yet, but loud enough that inmates who paid attention could feel it pressing on their skin. Jordan woke up before the first bell, sitting upright on his bunk and staring at the faint blue light spilling under the cell door. That same cold glow had become a symbol of survival for him. It meant morning. It meant he'd made it through another night. It meant today he needed to be smarter than he was yesterday. He reached under his thin mattress and checked the 2 items he kept hidden there. A small notebook where he wrote thoughts, reminders, patterns he observed, and the slip of paper he had received in the hallway the day before. The message on it, the coded warning, had been turning in his head ever since he read it. He didn't know exactly who sent it or what the timing meant, but he was sure of one thing: whoever wrote it had eyes everywhere. Someone inside the facility was tracking movements that even the officers weren't noticing. Jordan folded the note carefully and put it back in its place. He needed to find out more, but he needed to do it without giving away that he was looking. When the morning bell rang, the cell block came alive slowly. Metal doors slid open, inmates stepped into the hallways, and the sound of boots echoed against the concrete. Jordan stepped into the corridor, keeping his expression neutral, scanning without turning his head. Small details always mattered. The quietest details were often the loudest clues. In the cafeteria, he sat at his usual spot, back corner, wall behind him, full view of the room. Nothing unusual. But then he noticed something new. Marcus, the inmate who normally never left his table near the entrance, was now sitting near the officer's post. Subtle but different. Jordan wrote mental notes the way investigators do, silently, carefully, without letting anything show on his face. Across the room, Elijah caught his eye for just a second. Not a signal, not a warning, just acknowledgement. They weren't exactly allies, but they had a mutual understanding now. Information passed between people in this place without words, through small shifts in posture, changes in routine, or something as simple as where someone chose to sit. Later that afternoon, Jordan was called to the workshop. Nothing unusual about that, he worked there almost daily. The space was always cold, always soaked in the same blue industrial lighting that made everyone look tired, older, and sharper around the edges. But today, 2 officers he didn't recognize were stationed near the back wall. Their presence didn't make sense. The workshop wasn't a place that needed extra supervision. Jordan kept working, sanding a piece of wood with slow, steady movements. He didn't need to look directly at the officers to know one of them was watching him. He could feel the weight of it. Minutes passed. Maybe an hour. Then the officer stepped forward. Jordan Hayes. Jordan looked up, calm, steady. "Yes, sir. You're needed for a routine review." Routine. That word always meant the opposite. He wiped his hands on his uniform and followed them through the hallways. The walk wasn't tense, but it wasn't relaxed either. More like a conversation that someone was about to start but hadn't figured out how yet. They brought him to a small administrative room, neutral walls, a computer on the desk, blue-tinted lighting from a single overhead lamp. Nothing threatening. Just controlled. A sergeant entered behind them and closed the door. "Sit." Jordan obeyed. He kept his breathing slow, even. Inside, he was scanning everything: the sergeant's tone, the officer's posture, the paperwork on the desk. He wasn't worried, but he was calculating. The sergeant sat across from him. "We've observed some unusual movement in your block," he said. "Nothing disciplinary, but we're tracking shifts in routine. You've been seen with inmates you usually don't associate with. We just want to make sure everything is fine." Jordan nodded once. "Everything is fine. I've just been keeping to myself." The sergeant studied him. Jordan didn't look away. "Good," the sergeant finally said. "Just remember, if you see or hear anything that could cause disruptions, we need to know. We're trying to keep the peace in here." The meeting ended quickly. No pressure, no warnings. But the message behind the words was clear. Someone, somewhere, had put his name into conversations he didn't ask to be part of. On his way back to the block, he passed by the surveillance room. He glanced at the blue screens through the small window. Dozens of angles, dozens of stories unfolding at once. For a moment, he wondered how many of those screens had captured him without him realizing it. That evening, as he sat in his cell, he opened his notebook and wrote a single sentence. "When the system starts watching you, something is shifting." It wasn't fear he felt. It was preparation. The blue light from the hallway flickered once and settled again, cold and steady. Tomorrow, Jordan knew, would bring answers. Or more questions. In this place, one could never tell which came first.